The crystal was completely fogged over. I started to wonder what it could be, and I took it over to the window and I tilted it a little bit into the light, and right under it, you could just see the Rolex crown and the Rolex word mark just peering out from underneath it. My grandfather was from a completely different era from me. He was born at basically the turn of the 20th century. Because of that, I came to really appreciate history and my family history, and he was kind of the keeper of all of those things.
Soon after he passed away and we were at his apartment and you were helping me gather together, his effects, and you came running out of the bedroom with this beat up watch in your hand and told me you found it in his night table.
I looked at it and it didn't strike me as anything at first. I knew it was a watch, that was obvious. But looking at it, it basically had no bezel, so it was just the case, and the crystal was completely fogged over.
And I knew all the watches that he had worn over the years, so I really didn't recognize his watch. And you started looking at it and peering through the cracks in the crystal and said to me, "This looks like a Rolex." And lo and behold, it turned out to be a sub.
And the only reason I knew what that was because my dad wore one. In all these pictures that I have here, there's no pictures, no photographic evidence of him wearing it. And so it was just kind of a mystery watch that we found, which was just kind of incredible.
We decided that we would see if we could get it fixed up. So I sent the watch to Rolex in New York, and I got an estimate for $1,500, and they put the crystal, it'll put new hands, and you and I talked about it, and I gave them the okay to do it, and lo and behold, about a month later, I get a brand new Rolex Submariner in the mail.
My literal first watch, that would have to be a Shark Freestyle on a Velcro strap. But my first real watch, that was the Rolex Submariner. When I first got into watches and I started learning, about the history of the Submariner, I looked down at my wrist and thought to myself, man, I devalued this watch, I ruined it. I wore it a little bit less for that reason. In watch circles, I didn't kind of want to be seen and someone looks down at it, oh, is that this Submariner, what happened to it? What did you do? But I've come around on that for sure, but there was definitely those days.
Were you ever able to track down what the exact reference number was?
We finally figured out that this is a Submariner reference 5513, and the way that you tell on older Rolexes is it's actually between the lugs, so you have to remove the bracelet to see it. So on one side will be the serial number and the other side will have the reference number. We did figure out via the serial number that it did date back to 1967, which helped us place the watch in our family's watch history. So my dad graduated from college in 1968, and the time that my grandfather would have given him a Rolex date just for his graduation would have tracked with where he bought the watch, which he left Nigeria when he was finishing up his post in the State Department there, was coming back to the United States and stopped in Geneva, Switzerland. And judging by the age of this watch, it's pretty easy to figure out that he bought not only a date just for my dad, but he bought a Submariner for himself. In the case of this watch, there's some things on it now that are different than the way it would have looked originally. A 1967 5513 Submariner would have most likely been what's called a meters first Submariner. What that means is there's the depth rating on the watch under the Submariner word mark, and it says 660 feet equals 200 meters. This also would have been a matte dial Submariner. Now, as you can see, it has this deep lacquer-like gloss effect to it. Some people call it piano key black. It has applied markers with white gold surrounds. Originally, it likely would have just been a matte dial with painted markers all the way around with tritium lume. And because it would have had tritium, it would have had not only a Swiss designation at the bottom, but a tritium designation as well. This bracelet now has, what feel to me like solid end links. That means that, they're not hollow, and on the watch before, they would have been. Basically, the only thing that survived here is the case. The case is sort of the last vestige of the watch that it once was. I don't know what was done to the movement, but I have to think that sort of the heart and soul of the watch has remained. If you wanted to see if Rolex made a modern watch in a classic size, and kept all the things you love, like an aluminum bezel, this is pretty much what it would look like. It's got super luminova for the lume that will last forever. It's never gonna age, it's not gonna patina. This is basically a modern Rolex in a vintage package at this point. This watch has completely informed my taste and definitely had a huge influence on my collection. I have a GMT Master, and so much of the style of that watch is informed by me having loved this one originally. You know, like later on, I remember you and I would talk about whether or not it was a good idea, you know, now that we knew about watches as collector's items and all that kind of thing, you know. When I came to you with that kind of thing, did that ever change your mind, or did you always stand by the fact that it was the right thing to bring it back to life as a new watch?
Well, as I recently learned when my 4-year-old date just died, a watch is not a watch unless it works.
How did you know that you wanted to give it to me? Because like I said before, you had never told me that when we found it.
Well, we didn't know what it was, and I already had my father's two-tone Datejust that he had asked me to hold for you until you were older. So I figured, you got a dress watch, you might as well have a sport watch or a tool watch, to go with it. I didn't need it because I already had one, and I gave it to you. As I recall, in high school and college, you wouldn't be caught dead wearing a Rolex. So, I think it sat in your drawer for about 5 years before you got the courage to wear it.
That's true, but I have had it for almost 2 decades, and I did wear it, I've worn it pretty consistently ever since that time, so I kind of made up for lost time with it.
I think you've made your own history with that watch.